Welcome to the Manifesting Millions podcast, where we talk about manifestation, money, and practical guidance to creating your dream reality. My name is Amy Van Meel, and I am an experienced coach and transformation guide, obsessed with helping you get out of your own way and create a life that blows your mind each day you wake up. My goal in this podcast is to share practical manifestation, self-awareness, and growth techniques in real talk conversations. So if you're ready to massively transform your reality, your finances, your relationships, and your overall enjoyment of life, you are in the right place. I am absolutely delighted that you're here with me today, babe. Let's get into it. Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the podcast. I'm so excited that you're here with me today. I've started and restarted recording this episode. I think this is like my third or fourth time, because every time I'm like, how do I broach this topic on the podcast? I find myself just kind of staring at the screen in wonder. I'm going to just do my usual and be straight up, completely honest with you. So I went out for an interview earlier today for a job. And you might be going, Amy, don't you have a business? Why are you interviewing for a job? You are correct. I do have a business, and that business is growing. And also, I would like some financial consistency and to lend my efforts to, a team, something that feels good. So I'm being mindful, of course, as we always should be when we're looking for work. But what I realized when I was out and about today, I'm always thinking about all of you, and I'm always thinking about like, okay, what do folks need to know? What do women in particular need to know about money? Like, what are their questions? What might they be thinking about? And it occurred to me that so many of you will have a job as opposed to having a business. Now, a lot of the content that I consume that comes into my awareness is coming from fellow business owners. And that's a different sort of perspective on income and just kind of like the way we talk than it is when we're talking about having a job, right? And something that I want to be very clear of. So I find this so interesting. I always kind of shake my head, roll my eyes when I see people finding ways, this is better than that. I don't know, when I first started my first business, which was, oh my goodness, like maybe 15 years ago. I don't actually remember. I remember there was like almost this like air of like superiority of like, oh, we're business owners and that makes us better and bolder and braver and we're more willing to take risks. And that must mean that we're better people. It always kind of surprised me because I'm like, okay, I don't think there's one that's better than the other. It's just a different approach to creating income. That's literally all it is. Your job, your business are all about creating income. That's kind of all. So anyway, what I found so interesting is just kind of the way people talk about it. So as I finished up the interview and I was off running a couple errands, I got to thinking about like, what are people wondering? And it occurred to me, you might be wondering, how do I go in and actually like do an interview? And maybe you aren't, but that's what we're going to talk about today. So when I was leading teams and coaching people as part of my job, I was always on the lookout for potential growth opportunities for the people who reported into me. And I have always been super supportive of like anything that they want to go after, but I'm not kind of your like Daisy May kind of everything you want is fine. Like we would talk about opportunities, talk about why they're applying, what they're looking for out of it, if they think they can do it, all that kind of stuff. I always wanted to make sure that anybody who is going after a position was well set to do so and like would have the best possible chance of getting it. And also offer a little dose of reality if they were like, I've been here for 2 weeks and I want to apply for this job and it's 16 levels higher than what I'm doing. It's like, okay, it's maybe not a question of whether or not you can do it, but it definitely is going to be a question of whether or not now is the right time to apply. So But in those conversations, of course, one of the natural progressions is to have conversations as folks are preparing to go into an interview. Now, what I find so fascinating, I have offered to countless people to help them prep for interviews. And I think maybe only one or two has ever taken me up on the offer. Most people are like, "No, I'm totally fine. It's fine. I'll figure it out. I don't want to do a mock interview or whatever." And they just kind of go it alone. And maybe that works and that's fine. And I'm not saying that I'm like the interview whisperer by any means, but it always surprises me when there's this offer of help. And in particular, to kind of color this in a little further, I had advanced very quickly. I was promoted twice in 15 months, which was very unheard of. I was leading large teams. I had a tremendous amount of responsibility. I was hiring. I was literally hiring, interviewing, and making the hiring decisions for my team. So when I was offering to help someone prepare for an interview, it wasn't coming just from like, hey, like I'm your friend, let's do this together. It's like, no, I know what goes into it. I know what interviewing um, folks are looking for. I know the process. Like, let me help you get prepared so you can show up in the best possible way. So it always kind of surprised me. So I did an interview a couple weeks ago, completely botched it, and have done a lot of self reflection afterwards of like, what went wrong? And the truth is a couple things, and I'm going to share these with you, not to be like, look, here's how I failed or here's whatever. I want to just be candid with you and maybe offer you some perspective shifts and some thoughts to think about like as you're expanding your career because it's going to happen for you as well. So this particular interview came at a time that I was not in a place to I didn't the truth is I didn't actually want a job. I was not interested in um going back into the type of work that I was interviewing for. I knew I could do this job in my sleep. Like if they literally just showed up at my door and said, "Amy, we want you to work for us." I'd be like, "Okay, great. Send me the equipment and let's go." Like I'd knock it out of the park. But I was not excited about this at all, and I was doing my very best to pull myself together. So, I felt a little bit of like a little ashamed when I didn't make it past the first interview for a job that like I could easily do. Like it was, I don't know. You'll know what I mean. Like just kind of the sense of feeling a little bit of ashamed of I absolutely should have nailed that interview. And I asked for some feedback and they were really great. They gave me some feedback and they basically said like for the first question we would have loved a little more context on here and the second question you gave an example but not a really strong one. I'm like, "Okay, that's fair." But what I knew most importantly was that energetically I was not a match for this role. It was so clear in the fact that a week before the interview I was sobbing going, "I don't want this job." So, of course, right? Totally not an energetic match to go forward. But related to what I talked about last week, related to financial gaps, I wanted to find a way to alleviate the stress of this gap while I was building my business. So, fast forward, um, totally different role, completely different scope of work, similar kind of work in the sense that like it's all the truth is pretty much all work is like customer focused, so that's fine. Again, a job that I could absolutely do in my sleep. It's a job that I've done before in a different capacity, so it's not a question of like whether or not I could do this. I knew I could do this. I was leading up to it. Of course, the week that was presented to me for potential interviews happened to perfectly coincide with the week of my period. I'm like, great. So I asked for the last possible day, which would give me the most possible chance of being out of like the hairy parts of our periods, right? Because even with the adjustments that I've made that I shared a number of episodes ago, which have had a tremendous difference on just how I experience having my period every 21 days, um, still, like my energy dips, my mood dips, my concentration dips. It's like all the things that you don't want as you're about to step into something like an interview arena. So, got to push to the end of the week. That was totally fine. I spent the week preparing. I prepared mock questions, I prepared my answers, And I reached out to a friend of mine who is an HR professional. So she has been in many an interviewing room. She has conducted countless interviews, done lots of hires, had to have all kinds of HR related questions. And I said, I really would love your help. Could you run a mock interview with me? I just want to practice. I feel a little out of practice. And the last job I had was in tech. And it's so fascinating to me. I like the world of tech is a very different world than much of what, and we should say, much of how other companies approach culture, approach interviewing, approach hiring, all the things, right? So I wanted to kind of get my feet underneath me so I'd feel good. So we did the mock interview, and her feedback was similar for almost all of my answers. And I want to share with you the spirit of the feedback. So I think this will be helpful. What I tend to do is to give more context than is needed, and it stretches my answers out. And I've seen both sides. When I've interviewed folks, I've seen folks who give like no context at all. You ask for an example, for example, of like maybe like how did you handle a tough client or what did that look like? And you get very little understanding. So you're like, I think they know what they're doing, but I don't really know. My answers tend to be on the opposite side where I'm like, okay, so it was a sunny day and I was driving, this car to work that day and I happened to run into a train and that meant blah, blah, blah. Like that's sort of how my answers. It's not quite that extreme, but it's approaching that. So the first feedback that she gave on virtually all my answers was basically tighten it up. You don't need these pieces. They don't care about jargon. Like all the stuff that you kind of think that you need is actually not needed. Here's the base of what they're looking for. So I suppose the first part of wisdom that I'll impart is pay attention to the root of the question. Understand what it is that they're after. If they ask you, for example, can you give me an example of a time that you had a challenging customer and what you did? Or can you give me an example of a time that you made a mistake and how you handled it? The truth is, like, the situation itself, they don't really care. They don't care what the actual situation was. What they're focusing on is things like, can this person recognize when something's gone sideways? How do they handle it if something goes awry or if someone's being like a real jackass to them, right? In the context of their work. What steps did they take? What's their process? That's what they're interested in. So that's the first thing, is really pay attention to the root of the question. Understand what they're going after. And I would this is definitely something that's, I would say, on the newer part of things, but like I would think that most companies these days are open and willing to you asking either for a restated question or a reframe of the question. I think that in particular as women, oh my goodness, I shared a video about this on TikTok the other day, about this conversation that had opened up in my Instagram messages. And I definitely recommend you go check it out. It's a slightly longer video, like it's approaching 10 minutes because I'm just kind of talking to you as I'm going through this. What I find is that in particular, if the question is asked from a male variety, how do I say it? A man, someone who like looks and seems to identify as a man, right? I have this, it's getting quieter and quieter and it's steadily diminishing, which is great. But this knee-jerk tug deep inside that I am required to answer. It is not available to me to not give them an answer, and to give them as full an answer as possible. Now that has shot me in the foot more times than I can count. All right. So what I want to be clear is when you're in an interview, and I'm going to make a little mental note right now to come back to this in a moment, but you have the authority and the power to ask for clarity on the question. And if for whatever reason it's just not landing, like let's say, for example, they are asking you for, an example of a time that you made a mistake and you're kind of like, could you clarify, like, are you looking for a mistake where I had an operating error or where I just did something wrong, but I fixed it myself? Like, does that matter? Like, you can ask those questions, and interviewers are going to keep their their feedback kind of vague because they want to see what you're going to come up with. But you absolutely have the space that you can ask for some clarity. Now, the thing that I put the little mental pin in, I'm going to pull out and share with you right now. This is the best thing I ever heard when, and I learned this like back in my 20s, and I got to give a shout out to, her name is Liz Ryan. Never met her, no idea where she came across. But I'm going to say she maybe showed up on my LinkedIn or something one day. I don't actually know. She is, I think, someone who probably used to be in HR and now has her own business. And anyway, the point is that she said something that she shared said, when you are interviewing or being interviewed, you are just as much interviewing them as they are interviewing you. And that really resonated with me. And I have held that in mind every single interview that I've ever gone into. And I have shared that bit of advice and insight with anybody who I've ever talked to about interviews, especially when folks are feeling nervous. We have this sense, and again, I think this is much stronger as women than for our male counterparts, that we are on display and being judged, and we are powerless in this situation. We are show ponies hoping to just be good enough, nice enough, liked enough that they're going to maybe please, oh, please extend me an offer so I have a job. When you shift that perspective from, oh my God, they're interviewing me and it means they're judging me, into actually, I don't know if I want to work with this company either. So I am going to be interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing me. It really shifts how you show up. It shifts the power dynamic and it makes it a much more balanced space. And candidly, ladies, listen up. I think this makes you kind of irresistible. If you think about it this way, when you, it doesn't matter where you are in terms of relationship status right now, we're going to assume that you are single, right? You are open and interested in finding a partner. If you are coming at it with, oh my God, I just really want to find somebody. Like, does he like me? Does he think he's cute? Am I wearing the right thing? Like, blah, blah, blah. Like that energy is off-putting, right? Or you get like weird people. You're going to get like weird guys who are like, hey, I like what you got going on. And like, maybe that works out, but chances are, if you've been around for like, if you're more than, I'll say 21, you've probably experienced that and gone, yeah, the guys that showed up with that energy weren't the greatest. When you are feeling confident, when you are open to a relationship, you want to share your life with somebody. Of course, it's not like you're like, I'm swearing off men from now until eternity. But you're not in this state of like trying so hard to find it. You become fucking irresistible. It is wild to me. I did not know or understand this concept when I was in my 20s. And I can only refer really to my 20s because I've been with my husband all the way through my 30s. But I remember that like people would, like my friends would often ask me like, how do you meet guys? Like, it wasn't like I was dating all the time. I had a few boyfriends. I never really did like the dating thing. But I wasn't like stressing out trying to find people in bars, wondering like, where is he? Like that wasn't really my jam. Um, and guys just kind of showed up when I was in this, like in the space right before I met my husband. So in the year of 2012, and I talked about that last week, all that happened. Um, a massive shift happened in me throughout that year. I had gone from a space of wanting to find this guy who kind of checked all the boxes into, I was like, you know what? I'm actually like pretty cool just being single for a little while. Like I have some debt that I want to get rid of. I want to set my life back in order. If somebody shows up, great, but I'm really not actively looking right now. Like I just actually want to focus on me for a little while. And OMG, it's like fucking catnip. And it's, I know we might want to try to manufacture it. And it does take, it's not, you can't fake that. You can't be like, no, like I'm not interested, but really I'm super interested in like watching you. You can't fake it, but it's this really like wonderful space where it's not a question of being okay or not being okay being single. You're just kind of like, whatever, it is what it is. I'll meet somebody. I'm not worried, but I've got other things on my mind. And like, OMG, you will become irresistible. When it comes to jobs, I think it's kind of the same thing. If you come in with this air of like, I really want this job, I really want them to like me, I really want to like prove that I can do it, like you are going to come across with this energy that they will read, and it is naturally off-putting. It's and I don't mean off-putting by like disgusting. What happens is because your energy is driving so far forward, it's like someone kind of like leaning right into you. You're naturally going to lean back, right? Like that's just what happens. You naturally lean back. It's the same thing. If you come in with this energy of like, oh my God, I just really want them to like me and like, please hire me. Like maybe the job will work out, but chances are you either won't get a call back or it won't work long term. Something will not be aligned for you long term. So when you're going in, keep in mind that you are interviewing them as much as they are interviewing you. It puts the power dynamic back into balance, and it helps you really start to think critically about what are the things they're asking you about. Now, also, always do a little bit of research. You don't have to spend hours researching a company, okay? The company that I interviewed with today, I probably spent a total of, I don't know, maybe an hour. And that includes like the call that I had with the recruiter to start, the time that I chatted with my husband about it, the time that I looked online and like read on their website and read their reviews, and like I didn't spend a huge amount of time diving deep, but I wanted to understand, who is this company, what are they about, what kinds of things are kind of piquing my interest now that I can draw on when it comes to questions. And then prepare some questions ahead of time. Write them down. Bring a notebook with you when you go into the interview. You may not look at those questions at all, and that's 100% okay. And you may write nothing down, and that's also 100% okay. If nothing else, you will show that you're showing up as someone who is prepared, who is ready for what's about to transpire, right? You're fully engaged, you're fully immersed into it. You're like, all right, let's do this. Let's see if this is going to work out. One of my favorite questions, and it's an interesting question, depends on like the business that you're going into, of course, and industries will approach this a little bit differently. But one of my favorite questions is whatever version feels good for you, that says, what is the gap on your team that you're hoping to fill through this hire? What it will give you is some insight into like, what are they actually looking for? Of course, they're looking for whatever the job title is. But if you are, unless you're doing something that's like, I don't know, you're stuffing envelopes and they don't care who you are, it could be you or a monkey, then it doesn't really matter. But chances are, especially as your career progresses, they are looking for a good fit for their team. And so by asking that question, you are now often causing them to think critically about something that they may not have thought of yet, but it also gives you insight. And I'm going to share an example of how powerful that insight is for you. So when I was in the process of interviewing for my second promotion with my last job, I had applied to a few different roles. The company was going through a huge expansion. There was lots of like hiring opportunities. I was interviewing for two roles at the exact same time. One was a single level jump, one was a double level jump. And that's only important in terms of like, it was a much bigger income boost if I did a two level jump versus a single level jump, right? In the interviewing process, which was rigorous on both sides, I asked the same question of the interviewers. What is the gap in your team that you're wanting to fill through this hire? And the role that was the two-level gap that would have like made all my income dreams come true and like put me in a completely different side of the company and like this sounded like amazing. The answer was, well, we actually have a really strong team. We really just need another like voice around the table. And that was so completely uninspiring to me. I was like, I'm not here to just be a voice around the table. That does not sound exciting to me. It doesn't light me up in any way, shape, or form. In fact, it sounds like you're kind of just like, whatever, we just need somebody in here. And nothing about where I was going and what I was doing was aligned to that. It made it very easy when I contrasted that with the answer I got from the other team, which I can't remember the answer specifically, but it was like much more of like, we need someone who's driven. We need someone who's willing to like lead teams and hire teams and grow teams and like learn fast and build strategy and set in processes and like all. And I was like, I was all but drooling as they're telling me like, this is what we need. I'm like, that sounds fucking amazing. It made it super easy for me to go, okay. So this other role is more in alignment with my financial goals, but the first role is actually much more in alignment with what I want to be doing with my time and how I want to be seen and showing up for my job. So it helped me really gain clarity. So it's a great question that I recommend everybody asks because it will show that you're thinking about the wider context, that it's not just you and the viewer who are making this decision about whether or not you're going to be a good fit. It's you're joining a team. Are you actually going to want to be there, be valued when you get there? Are you going to be a good fit? You could be technically very proficient in the role, but like you could be a terrible fit for the team. You don't know. And that question can help open that up for you. The last thing I think that I'll touch on today, because I could go deep. Oh my goodness, we could spend hours here like talking about this. Well, two things, I suppose, because I would be remiss as someone who teaches about money to not like address money as part of the interviewing process. But the first thing that I want to talk about before we dive down that route is more a bit on like the spirit of how you're coming into it. So I've already talked about being prepared, having questions ready, do a practice interview, do a mock interview. It doesn't have to be, I'm just going to really quickly clarify on that. Like a mock interview does not mean that you have to go through this like completely full formal process. When I connected with my friend, it was very relaxed. She asked me the question as she would as an interviewer. And like, even like it felt awkward because of course I'm trying to answer to my friend and I'm trying to bridge this space between like I'm here like practicing but like also trying to be professional. So it doesn't have to be like this like super high touch kind of thing. It's just really letting you work through your answers, practice kind of being in that space and shift some of that energy as you're going in. So the morning of course, I could feel nervousness building. And I was having my coffee, was sitting in the living room reading my book, completely enthralled, but all of a sudden I just felt this like that sick to my stomach feeling of like, oh God, I'm about to do something. And historically, I would push that down and go, nope, it's fine. There's nothing to be nervous about. It's going to be fine. And like just push it away. But that doesn't help. That actually, I touched on that in the last workshop that I did. But really, you're just resisting the emotion, which is holding it in place. So instead, I went, okay, I see you and I respect you and I honor you and I'm totally okay with you being here. This sense of feeling nervous is because there's some skin in the game. This means something to me. Whether it works out or it doesn't, I care. And that's a good thing. If I felt nothing, it would probably mean that I didn't really care that much, that there really isn't a lot of maybe value into what I'm about to do. And that's 100% fine. When I first started recording podcasts, when I first started showing up on social media, I felt nervous every time. And I would kind of like blather on and hope that I would communicate something. There was lots of ums and ahs and, like thinking. And the more I did it, the more it became natural and the more comfortable became at it. And that's true. This is not news to you. I know this. You have been existing in the world. You know that this is true. But we have this like tendency to need to push it away. Can't feel nervous because then I can't fucking concentrate. Absolutely, you can concentrate because it will go away once you get engaged into the conversation. So it's before the interview. I'm like, okay, I want to make sure that I have my answers ready. And I fucking love how the universe works because it's always working out in my favor all the damn time. I open my iPad and I pull open my notes app because that's where I had all my like practice interviews. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to like talk through my questions so that I'm ready to go. I open up the notes app and it opens up to the last note that I had on there, which is not the last note that I was on my computer or the last note that I was on my phone. It's the last note that I would have made when I was on the iPad. And all it says is, confidence is your best accessory. And I saw that and I was like, oh, that's really nice. And then I went to go pull open the list so I could go find my interview questions. And I looked back at this text on the screen and I'm like, no, that's actually all that I need to know. I know my answers. It's my lived history. It's not like I have to remember, like my own history. I've already practiced. I've already done all of that. Actually, it's really just a matter of reminding myself I'm fucking awesome and building my confidence so that when I go into that space and into that conversation, I am showing up as the fullest expression of me. So I closed my notes app. I opened up Spotify. I pulled open my liked songs and I found all of my best boss woman vibe songs. I pulled up some Meghan Trainor. I pulled up, I don't know who the artist is, but the song is called I Slay. It's one of my favorites. I danced and like moved my body, which was great because it also helped to shift the energy of the nerves that I had been feeling sort of out and around and off of my body. And I just grounded into myself. I left on time. I arrived early. I did a couple of social media things before I walked into the interview. When I walked into the building, I walked in as if I had been there countless times. I went straight to the receptionist. I was not at all nervous. I just said, hey, I'm here to meet these two people. They were like, okay, let me go get them. I said, do you mind if I use the washroom before they come out? Like I was so completely relaxed. And then when I came out, both of the interviewers were ready to go. Off we went. We got into the room. And this is my favorite. I am especially skilled at asking very good questions. And something that I have been learning over, and this is one of my favorite things. Anybody who tells you that getting older is for the birds is missing out, okay? Let me just tell you, getting older is fucking awesome. I shared so many times with my team that I'm like, I really love being in my 30s. Like my fuck it bucket is getting littler and littler and littler. And at that point, like I was still a few years away from turning 40. And I'm like, I'm very curious what's going to be like when I reach 40. Like, what's it going to be like? And honest to goodness, like my 40s, I'm not even 41 yet. Like I'm just 40. But like my fuck it bucket is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. And in what I think of as my fuck it bucket, it's the bucket of fucks that I have to give. It's my fuck it bucket. So that bucket used to be giant. Oh my God. In my teens and in my 20s, I was so worried about what everybody thought. I was worried about how I was going to be perceived. I was worried about like, do they like me? Am I doing okay? Do I look okay? And now I'm like, I don't fucking care. If you don't like me, that's okay. I don't need to make you like me. If someone's having a bad day or whatever, like I'm still human. Obviously, there's going to be moments that I'm like, what the hell? But like the amount of fucks that I have to give have greatly dwindled. And it's one of my favorite things about getting older. So when I go, I giggle. I think I said something like this. I heard a different version of it from Brené Brown, who's like, I love myself so much, I'm dangerous. And it's sort of along that lines, but it's more like, I'm just like so over trying to please everybody that like I feel so confident and at ease in my skin. I'm actually kind of dangerous. Like it's a really good place to be. So we walked into the interview room and I kind of laughed. I don't know if it's giants that work at this place because this chair was so high. Oh my God, my toes barely reached the ground. But the table was also tall, so I didn't want to lower the chair because then I'm like, then I'm going to feel like a midget sitting behind this table. But our conversation, and I say conversation very specifically, it was less interview and more conversation. When you go in knowing yourself and feeling yourself and having grounded into the confidence of who you are and understanding you have a tremendous amount of value. You are interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. It really shifts how you show up. So when I first saw the booking for the interview, it was an hour long. And I was like, oh my God, is that normal? And my friend who was in HR, she's like, yeah, that's totally normal. I'm like, okay. We were in the interview for an hour and 15 minutes. Now, I could see near the end, everybody was dwindling a little because we had spent an hour asking each other questions. But I want you to hear that. We had been asking each other questions. It wasn't me sitting meekly in my chair, waiting for them to ask me questions, doing my best to show up as a puppet and go, okay, here I am. Here's the good things. Here's my strengths. Here's my weaknesses. No, I was fully engaged from the minute we sat down. So literally, like, their first question was some version of what intrigued you about this role, which I was very prepared for. And I gave them my answer, which was a much tighter version of what I had practiced the night before with my friend, which was great. This is why practice is so good. But I redirected it at them. So they said, what do you know about what have you learned and whatever? And I said, well, so here's the things that I understand. Why don't you tell me what you think I need to know about the company? And that opened the door for them to just share, like, here's a little bit of our history. Here's kind of what we're doing. Here's our goals. And immediately I jump in. So, they shared like, okay, we have this goal for growth. It's X%, blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, okay, is that goal intended to be like total volume or is intended to be cost? Okay, now I know. Now we're talking about revenue goals. Those questions, by standing forward and just asking a conversational question back and forth, at the end of the interview, I have no idea how this is going to go. It's possible they'll come back to me with an offer, and it's possible they're going to go, oh my God, I don't want that person anywhere near here. I have no idea. I feel pretty chill about it. But at the end of the interview, what really struck me was, and I was interviewing with two gentlemen, which is ladies, right? You know what that can feel like when you're in the room with two gentlemen who are effectively in like judging seats, which did not feel like this at all. At the end of the interview, one of the interviewers said, I think of everybody that we've spoken to, you probably have the best understanding of the role from this, like just from our conversation. Now that could be a good thing. It could be a bad thing. They might be like, this person like really dives deep, or they could go, wow, this person really dives deep. We want them on our team. But what it showed them, so it showed them in the moment, here's how I think, here's how I work, here's how I get to the bottom of things, which is really important for the scope of the role that I was interviewing for. The other thing was it allowed me to see, how much have you thought about these things? What is your focus for your business? What are you hoping for your team? When you hear buzzwords, and I hear this a lot, I hear a lot of companies say we're growing really fast, we have lots of opportunities for growth. When you actually start asking questions about that, okay, what does that mean? What does that look like? What are the opportunities for growth? What are the timelines for growth that you're anticipating? You're not being like, well, how fucking long do I have to wait in this one job? No, you're going, what is the plan? And then you pay attention to the answers. And you'll get a good sense of, what is that company about? So what I was very curious in our conversation was the topic of values came up a number of times. And near the end of our time together, I'm like, well, you've mentioned your values. You've mentioned that it's really important to you that whoever you hire on aligns with those values, but you haven't asked me anything about them. How are you standing in these spaces and determining whether or not someone matches with your values? Which I understand is a ballsy question to ask, to go, you haven't asked me about this, so how do you know that I match? What fascinated me was the answer. So they described some things like, well, we can see these things right away. And I'm like, okay, blah, blah, blah. But some of the things that were being brought forth weren't necessarily super clear. And what I found most interesting was when I asked specifically about just one, they kind of answered it, but not super clearly. And then they fell into the same, call it rhythm or script of, and then these are the other values, which tells me they've practiced this, they've had this conversation a few times before, but also tells me that, it might be interesting on whether or not that translates through into the team. I don't know if it will, and I don't know if it doesn't, but it gives me some insight. And so that's the whole goal. The questions that you're asking questions to understand who they are. How do they operate? What are their expectations going to be of you? If you're going into a role that's highly technical in nature and you know that you can do it, but maybe it's a stretch, maybe it's like stepping into a slightly different product or a slightly different industry than you're used to, you learn really fucking fast, but you need a little bit of time. Everybody does. Like anybody who's like, you need to learn this overnight. Like, I mean, come on, who can learn like that other than maybe a computer, right? When you start to ask questions and go, okay, so how are you teaching your team? How is your team building their knowledge? What are their resources available? What are the kinds of things that you're doing to support the employees in achieving those goals? What it will tell you at the beginning before you ever make a decision of joining them or not is, are you going to be set up for success, or are you going to be constantly feeling like you're running away from this stick and trying to prove yourself? And for us as women in particular, it's so, so important to understand what we're doing. We will, and I understand not all women are identical, obviously, but women are deeply entrained to um, go above and beyond and to continually have to prove their worth, prove their value, prove that they deserve a seat at the table. Guys don't have that. Guys don't have that, like, this gnawing deep in your gut feeling of, oh my God, if I don't prove every minute of every day that I deserve to be here, then I'm going to lose my job. Guys don't have that feeling, right? It's so fascinating. I'm very curious, like, oh, the freedom that must be to not have to worry about that every day. That sounds amazing. So you're trying to understand, your goal in the interview is this company a company that aligns with who I am, with how I work, with what I'm looking for? And you can only do that by asking questions. And be okay if it's part of your nature to push a little, to challenge the questions a little, to, like, your job isn't to make them feel super comfortable. I mean, you're not going to ask like, not stupid questions, but like, well, dumb questions. Like, I mean, I don't have to explain a dumb question to you. You're smart. You know what I mean when I say like dumb questions, but like, you can ask challenging questions. You can push them to think. You can really, it will give you so much insight as to who that person is, how that company works, kind of what that looks like. And if they just shut you down, well, now you know before you ever take on a role, that's likely what you're going to experience more of. Are you down with that or are you not? Right? Gives you great insight. Okay. The very last thing that we're going to very quickly touch on is compensation, because as I mentioned earlier, I would be remiss if we had a conversation about interviewing and making those changes and not talking about compensation. There is absolutely no one size fits all. Okay. I'm going to just front that right off the hop. I have done a series of workshops on negotiation, talking about like how to negotiate. And let me know. I can always like do a free workshop or something, or I might add that into the Building Vampires program. I don't actually know exactly, but I'm willing to like share that knowledge in some way. The thing that I want you to think about when it comes to compensation, women are not, we are not taught at any point in our life to demand money. And fuck, if you've been existing in the world as a woman for like any amount of time, you are aware that we still get paid less than men. I don't understand how this is still a thing, but here we are. It's 2024. Women are still getting paid less than men. And we're not even going to touch, all the other, I'll say versions of minorities, because I mean, we have like women and men, and then we of course have all the different races, and we have different identities, and like we're not going to unpack that at all. We're not going to come anywhere close to that with a 10-foot pole. But in general, women are making less than men. What I find very interesting is, so I'm very part of this interview that I went through today is also like a little, everything I do now is kind of like this little experiment in my life of like, I wonder what this is going to look like. When the role first was brought to me, it was a recruiter who reached out to me and said, "Hey, Amy, I have this role. I think you'd be great at it. What do you think?" And after understanding more and again, asking lots of questions, doing my own like digging through like understanding what they knew about it, etc. I'm like, okay, so what's the compensation that they're anticipating for this role? And I had to ask, I think 2 or 3 times. The first time it didn't get answered. It was sort of rolled into the rest of the conversation, and that was fine. But I wanted to know. I had an expectation of compensation, and I'm not going to put my hat in the ring for a role that's like 50% less than what I'm going to be wanting to get paid. Like, what a waste of my time and their time. Like, that's just silly, right? So I did have to ask a couple times. So understand, you can ask. It is different when you're working with a recruiter versus when you're talking directly to a hiring manager or like an interviewer. There are, of course, and we don't have time today. We'd be here for hours to kind of talk about like how would you approach it here and how would you approach it there. Just know that you can ask compensation bands and to get some understanding. So in the context of the conversation with the recruiter, I asked, and like I said, had to ask a couple of times to find out what is the compensation expected for this role. And they gave me the band, which was a really big band. And I was like, wow, that's a lot of room. And they're like, yes, it is. And they're like, what's your expectation? Now, this is a big growth moment for me. Historically, old Amy would have downplayed and gone, I'd be okay with whatever is just above the lowest amount, but I'd like to be closer to the top. No. Today, Amy went in and was like, I fucking know my value. I know what I bring to the table. I know I'm fucking amazing and I know I can do this job, no problem. So I was very clear. I said, well, my expectations are this. And I gave a small range, right? Like a $5,000 range between the lowest and the highest. And the response was, yeah, okay, I think that's totally doable. So what was fascinating to me is then in the interview, nearing the end, the question of compensation came up. And they said, now this could, of course, be just a tactic. I don't know. But they came to me and said, okay, so we understand your expectation. They might have not used that word. It doesn't really matter. And they gave me the lowest amount that I had said to the recruiter, which I thought was interesting. They didn't give me a band. They just gave me the lowest amount. And I said, actually, it would be more like the highest amount that I gave to the recruiter. And they're like, oh, and I laughed and I just kind of said, looks like I'm going to have a chat with the recruiter following our conversation. What that does is a couple of things. Now, yeah, okay, I'm going to just like catch this. You're probably already asking this question, but Amy, what if you tell them the compensation and it instantly puts you out of the running? And I'm going to answer that with, so what if it does? Do you want to take on a role that you are going to be underpaid or feel undervalued from the start? Your highest leverage time in terms of like the amount of bargaining chips on the table available for you is when you get hired. Once you get hired into the company, you are now starting from whatever that financial set point was the day you agreed to your opening salary. And I want you to really, really understand that, because this really plays into a much broader context of women in wealth, women and earning power. When we start smaller, and we know this, it is statistically proven women start earning way less than men, right? It's very hard to increase your earnings from there in any significant kind of way. So, the very start, right when you're getting hired, that is when you have the greatest bargaining chip. It also means that you have to understand what is your walking away point. So I touched on this when I did my negotiation workshops, but in effect, you have to know going in, let's say, I'm going to just we're going to make up some numbers. Let's say the salary band for a job is somewhere from $50,000 to $75,000. Doesn't matter what the currency is. We're just going to use dollars for this example. You're going in going, well, I'm fucking worth $75,000. Hell, I'm actually worth way more than that. Okay. Are you actually, do you know, can you back it up that you are a $75,000 value to the company that you're coming in with? And do you understand that that is what does that leave you in terms of room for growth? What does that align you with in terms of expectations, right? Because if you're being paid more, likely and definitely as a woman, you're going to be having higher expectations on you. Can you deliver, right? It's not as it's really hard to do, and it's something that will take you probably some time and possibly some wisdom to get to. It is not, as much as you can, try not to let pride get in the way. That's really fucking hard. I get that. I think that all of us are getting underpaid atrociously so. The idea of anybody making if people making less than 60,000, that to me should be the minimum. If you're serving tables, you should be making $60,000 a year, right? And then it goes up from there. But anyway, I digress. I get really heated up when we talk about compensation. If you understand the band and you know where you fall within that band, so have your walking away point. So for example, our band is 50 to 75,000. You have experience, you know you can do the job, you know you could do it really fucking well. You know you also bring a whole bunch of additional assets with you into this role that would actually be super helpful for this company. So you go in and maybe you give your band and be very careful. I noted this in my negotiation workshop that when you give a band, so let's say you were to say 60 to 75,000 is your band, all they're going to hear is 60,000. So whatever you put as your lowest amount, assume that's the only dollar amount that they hear. Take a moment to really consider what are you going in with, understanding as well that compensation is not just the dollars that you take home, right? It's vacation time, it's benefits, it's all kinds of different things. There's lots of different things. And again, like I said, I touch on this on the negotiation workshop where it's these different things you can consider in terms of, okay, maybe they can't give you the salary. Maybe you want 75,000, but that's completely outside of their budget. I don't know. So they can only pay you 60, but maybe there's other options available for you that are not necessarily take-home dollars, but do offer a lot of value. More vacation time, more flexibility. It could be all kinds of things, right? Growth opportunities, that's really good to think about, that potentially part of your negotiation could be having access to specific growth opportunities. These are the things that we want to think about. But if we're only talking about compensation, do your best to be very clear. And if you're offering a band, have a fairly tight band. And know what your walking away point is. That's the last thing that I'm going to just share on this is if they sometimes, I don't know how people can stay in business when this is how they operate, but sometimes you're going to come across businesses who are just going to do their best to grind you down as far as possible. How cheaply can we get this person? We want them. We've already said, hey, we want to hire you. But now they're trying to see, can they get you for a little bit less and a little bit less and a little bit less. What I found so interesting, I'm reading this book called On Our Best Behavior, which I highly recommend. Oh my, it's a kind of a heavy read in the sense that there's a lot of content in it, but it's very, very good. And as women, I think very valuable for all of us to read. And I'm reading the chapter on money, of course, which I just love. And the author talks about this person who is a woman, is a recruiter, hiring manager, and how awkward she would feel when she's representing a company. She goes in with a lowball offer, expecting the candidate to come back, and then they begin the negotiations. And almost every single one of the women don't. They just accept whatever the lowest offer is. And the recruiter said, like in this book, said, it's such a terrible, awful place to be in. As a woman, I want to say to them, please negotiate for yourself. There's room here. But as a representative of the company, I can't do that. So understanding there, of course, is going to be times, and I would say probably like the more entry level the role is, the less space there is for negotiation. But this is a skill that is really worth working on and building in your career because it will make so much difference in the long term. Sure, right now maybe $5,000 or $10,000 a year doesn't make a difference, but let's say you start at $50,000 and some guy that you know starting in the exact same role starts at $60,000. All of a sudden, that sets a lot of your trajectory going forward. Your expectations are different. What you like in terms of what you expect to be paid for your work, completely different, and it sets your trajectory. So today it may not make a big difference, but 10, 15, 20 years from now, that difference of only $10,000 could be massively expanded. It could be now a difference of, I don't know, 50, 60, $100,000 a year. Those are massive amounts of difference between what could have started from the same thing, right? So really do your best. Understand what your walking away point is. If the salary band starts at 50, but you cannot make ends meet at $50,000, for the love of Pete, please don't take the job. Trust that when you say yes to an opportunity, that opportunity is going to be aligned in a way that you are fully supported. It is scary. Oh my God, it is absolutely terrifying as fuck, especially if you are in a place of like really feeling financially strapped, kind of struggling for a job. If you absolutely feel that you have no choice and you have to say yes anyway, then of course, please keep like looking for opportunities. Because I am never ever going to tell you not to worry about like paying your bills. Like what a ridiculous thing to say. But understand your walking away point. If it comes back to you and you're just like, no, I can't function on that, you can just say, I'm unwilling to work for anything less than whatever the amount is. And if the company really wants you, they understand that like it is absolutely impossible for you to earn less than whatever your lowest amount is. And again, keep in mind that you can have a lower compensation and negotiate for other things, right, to offset that. Then they potentially will either find the money or you just know it's not a good fit for you. And that's okay too. Okay. This has been a deeper conversation than I thought. Actually, I thought this would be a slightly shorter episode, but here we are clocking in around an hour, which is 100% okay. I trust that this episode has brought a tremendous amount of value for you. I think that, especially as women, we need to talk about this more and more and more. I think it's so important that we have open conversations about compensation across all industries, and that we hopefully, through my sharing with you some of my experience and what I've seen, what I know, what I've learned, that helps open up some doors for you as well, and not just doors in terms of like career opportunities, but like doors in your brain. And let this, I would encourage you to take this conversation to your friends. Ask them, start opening up the conversation. Say, hey, like, what's it been like when you go interviewing? How do you feel? How do you show up? What do you find? how much are you making and does that feel good to you? And what did that look like? And did you negotiate? And if so, how did you negotiate? By sharing this knowledge, and I wanted to point out that historically, all the way back in time, women have been the sharers of the knowledge. It's what we naturally do, okay? Like that's how tribes have been so successful, through the sharing of wisdom, the sharing of knowledge, and that's primarily been women. It's well documented. They know this now. So sharing that, understanding that, breaking down, being a little bit brave. I understand that it might feel scary or even maybe wrong, which is why I'm not suggesting that you just talk with random stranger, but I'm saying have conversations with your friends and open those conversations. And what is so fascinating to me is that you're also going to uncover and discover like some of the things that your friends are uncomfortable with. Or maybe they've been like, oh my God, like I've wanted to have this conversation forever, but I'm terrified to ask anybody about it. Thank you so much for asking me, right? Open those conversations, start to learn from one another, and really support one another going in. I love stories that I've heard a few of them now where women are sharing this knowledge, sharing this wisdom, and through that network of sharing, they find out, oh my God, wait a minute, I'm like settling for this amount when actually I should be making way more. Hold the phone. I'm going in asking for a raise, or I'm going in for a promotion, or I'm in the process of negotiating for a job and I'm going to negotiate for more, right? So it is not something that women are taught. We are not told that it is our natural ability. We are told very much just to be grateful for what we get. I am writing a whole section about that into one of the additions into the Building Vampires program right now. Yeah. So with that, I hope you have an amazing week ahead. Thank you so much for joining me. Of course, do the things, leave me a review. That would be really amazing. I so appreciate it. Reviews are so important for the reach of a podcast. So please leave a review on your favorite podcasting platform. And of course, if you want to submit any questions, the link is always in the show notes, but it's, I think it's amyvanmeal.com/questions. I think that's the URL. I'm just doing this off the top of my head, but the URL is always in the show notes. And take advantage of some of the freebies. So if you're wanting to expand your awareness with where you're at in your money reality right now, I've got the 8 questions download. If you're wanting some tools to help you shift some beliefs, to ground your nervous system, to effortlessly change your beliefs, that's what that expansion bundle is all about. And if you have been getting excited about what I've been talking about, and you're like, I kind of want to learn more about this program that she has, the waitlist is open for the next enrollment period of Building Vampires, which is likely going to be coming in a few weeks. So all of those links are in the show notes. And yeah, thank you so much for hanging out with me. Bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode. If you loved what you heard today, be sure to share it with me by leaving a review on your favorite podcast platform and help me reach more like-minded people who are ready to expand their life. If you haven't yet followed me on social media, find me on Instagram for extra love and inspiration by following @AmyVanMeal or visit my website at amyvanmeal.com. I love you so much, babe, and I am damn proud of you. I am already excited to connect in the next episode. And in the meantime, believe in yourself with the confidence of a 5-year-old.